I'm Mr. Midnight Hollow, your terrifying host, and you're about to hear that story and more in today's episode of Midnight Terror Tales. Tonight I've got a blood-soaked tale of supernatural horror featuring a werewolf's rampage through passenger cars, a desperate fight for survival in confined quarters, and the horrifying discovery that some monsters were once human. If you're already part of our community, your support means the world to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this. Or subscribe to see what rises from the depths of darkness and unfolds before you. Now, let's begin. The 11:47 p.m. Amtrak from Chicago Union Station to Milwaukee was nearly empty that Tuesday night in October. I settled into my window seat in car 3, watching the city lights blur past as we pulled away from the platform. The rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks had always been soothing to me, a welcome change from the chaos of my former life as a special forces operative. My name is Marcus Reed, and I was heading to my mother's farm outside Milwaukee for a much-needed break. 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq had left me with scars that ran deeper than the visible ones on my arms and chest. The transition to civilian life hadn't been easy, but my mother's place in rural Wisconsin always helped clear my head. I adjusted the Sig Sauer P220 in its shoulder holster beneath my jacket. Old habits die hard, and I never traveled unarmed anymore. The weight of the .45 caliber pistol was comforting, a constant reminder that I could handle whatever came my way. The train consisted of 5 passenger cars plus the engine. Car 1 was at the front, right behind the locomotive, followed by cars 2 through 5 stretching back like a metal serpent through the Wisconsin countryside. I was in car 3, roughly in the middle of the consist. The conductor, a heavy-set man named Gerald, had checked our tickets 20 minutes ago and mentioned we'd be traveling straight through to Milwaukee with no stops. The late hour meant most seats were empty, maybe 15 passengers spread throughout the entire train. In my car, there was only an elderly man reading a newspaper 3 rows ahead, and a young woman with headphones sitting across the aisle. The quiet was peaceful, almost meditative as the train swayed gently on the tracks. I pulled out my phone to text my mother that I was on schedule, but there was no signal. Not unusual for this stretch of track that wound through farmland and small towns. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes, letting the gentle motion of the train begin to relax my always alert nervous system. That's when I heard the first scream. My eyes snapped open immediately. Combat training had taught me to differentiate between different types of screams: pain, fear, anger, death. This one was pure terror, coming from somewhere toward the front of the train. The elderly man with the newspaper looked up, confusion written across his weathered face. The young woman across the aisle pulled off her headphones, her eyes wide with concern. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Before I could answer, another scream echoed through the car, followed by what sounded like metal being torn apart. The lights in our car flickered once, then steadied. Something was very wrong. I stood up, my hand instinctively moving toward my weapon. "Stay here," I told the woman, whose name tag read Sarah. She worked for some tech company in Milwaukee, heading home from a business trip. "What's happening?" the elderly man asked, setting down his newspaper. "I don't know yet," I said, "but stay in your seats until I get back." The connecting door between cars required some force to open against the train's motion. As I stepped into the narrow walkway between cars, the sound of the train wheels seemed louder, more ominous. Car 2 was ahead, and through its windows, I could see people moving frantically. When I opened the door to car 2, chaos greeted me. Passengers were shoving past each other, desperate to reach the rear of the train. A middle-aged businessman pushed past me, his white shirt torn and stained with something dark. "What's happening?" I grabbed his arm. "Something's killing people up front," he gasped. "Some kind of animal. It tore apart the conductor." He yanked free and continued running toward car 3. I pushed forward against the flow of panicked passengers. A woman in a blue dress stumbled past me, sobbing uncontrollably. Blood splattered her clothes. But she didn't appear injured. Not her blood, then. The smell hit me as I moved deeper into car 2. It was a scent I knew too well from my military days, the metallic tang of fresh blood mixed with the acrid odor of fear and death. But there was something else, something animal and wild that made my skin crawl. Near the front of car 2, I found the first body. Gerald, the conductor who had checked our tickets earlier. What was left of him was scattered across 3 seats. His throat had been completely torn away, and his chest cavity was opened like a book. Claw marks, impossibly large claw marks, had shredded the metal wall beside his seat. I drew my weapon, keeping it low but ready. Whatever had done this was still on the train, somewhere ahead of me in car 1. The overhead lights flickered again, and for a moment, the car plunged into darkness before the emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Another body lay in the aisle near the connecting door to car 1. A young man, maybe college age, who had tried to run but hadn't made it far. His back had been opened by claws that must have been 6 inches long. The metal floor beneath him was slick with blood. I stepped carefully over the body and peered through the window into car 1. It was darker in there, with only the red emergency lights providing illumination. I could see overturned seats, scattered luggage, and dark shapes on the floor that I knew were more bodies. The connecting door to car 1 hung off its hinges. The metal twisted as if something incredibly strong had simply torn it apart. Deep gouges scored the doorframe, claw marks that went through steel like it was paper. As I stepped into car 1, the stench of death became overwhelming. This car had been a slaughterhouse. Bodies were everywhere, torn apart with a savagery that spoke of pure animal fury. Men, women, even a teenager who had been traveling alone, none had been spared. But it was the damage to the car itself that made me realize this wasn't just some large, wild animal that had somehow gotten onto the train. The seats were shredded, the metal walls gouged and dented. Windows were spider-webbed with cracks. Whatever had done this possessed strength beyond anything natural. I heard movement from the front of the car, near the engine compartment. Something large shifting in the darkness. I raised my weapon, finger on the trigger, and moved forward step by careful step. The emergency lighting suddenly failed completely, plunging the entire car into absolute darkness. In that moment of blindness, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was the sound a wolf might make, but magnified tenfold, deeper and more menacing than anything that should exist. Then came the roar. It was deafening in the confined space of the train car, a sound of pure, predatory rage that seemed to shake the very walls. And in that roar, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. Intelligence. This wasn't just an animal. This was something that understood what it was doing. The backup power kicked in again, bathing everything in that hellish red light. And that's when I saw it for the first time. At the far end of car 1, standing over the torn remains of what had once been a human being, was something that defied everything I thought I knew about the world. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, covered in coarse, dark fur that glistened with fresh blood. Its shoulders were broad and powerful, its arms longer than they should be, ending in hands tipped with claws that gleamed like knives in the red light. But it was the head that truly terrified me. The elongated snout filled with fangs, the pointed ears, the eyes that glowed with an unholy yellow light. A werewolf. The word formed in my mind unbidden, and I almost laughed at the impossibility of it. I didn't believe in monsters, in supernatural creatures that belonged in old movies and campfire stories. But there it was, standing in the narrow aisle of a passenger train, blood dripping from its massive jaws. Those yellow eyes fixed on me, and I saw recognition there. It knew I was armed, knew I was different from its other victims. The creature's lips pulled back in what might have been a grin, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Behind me, I could hear the panicked voices of survivors in the rear cars. People who were counting on me to stop this thing, even though they didn't know it yet. People who would die if I failed. I squeezed the trigger. The .45 caliber round caught the creature center mass, the impact spinning it sideways into the metal wall. Dark blood splattered across the emergency exit window, and for a split second, I thought I had killed it. I was wrong. The werewolf recovered with impossible speed, shaking off the bullet wound like it was nothing more than a bee sting. Those glowing yellow eyes locked onto mine again, and this time, there was no mistaking the fury I saw there. It had been playing with its other victims. Now it was angry. The creature launched itself at me with a speed that defied physics. One moment it was 20 feet away, the next it was airborne, claws extended, jaw open wide enough to take my head clean off. I dove sideways, rolling between the seats as the beast crashed into the space where I had been standing. Metal screamed as its claws raked across the floor, leaving gouges an inch deep. I came up firing, putting 2 more rounds into its torso before it spun toward me again. The bullets punched through its hide, drawing more of that dark blood, but it barely slowed down. A massive paw caught me across the chest, sending me flying backward toward the connecting door. The impact drove the air from my lungs and sent my weapon skittering across the blood-slicked floor. I tasted copper and knew at least one rib was cracked. The werewolf advanced slowly now, savoring the moment. It had learned I could hurt it, but it also knew I was outmatched. Those intelligent eyes held a cruel satisfaction as it watched me struggle to stand among the carnage it had created. I reached for my cig, but the creature was faster. A clawed foot pinned my gun hand to the floor, applying just enough pressure to make me gasp in pain without breaking bones. It wanted me alive for this part. The beast leaned down, its massive head inches from mine. The stench of its breath was overwhelming. Raw meat, blood, and something else, something primal that spoke of dark forests and ancient hungers. Saliva dripped from its fangs onto my face as it opened its mouth wider. That's when the train hit a sharp curve. The sudden shift in momentum threw the werewolf off balance. Its weight lifted from my arm for just a moment, but it was enough. I rolled away and grabbed my weapon, coming up in a combat crouch as the creature recovered its footing on the swaying floor. This time I aimed for its head. The bullet creased its skull, taking off a chunk of ear and drawing a roar of pain and rage that made the windows vibrate. The werewolf stumbled backward, shaking its massive head, dark blood streaming down its neck and matting its fur. I put 2 more rounds into its chest, aiming for where I hoped its heart might be. The impact staggered it, but didn't drop it. Whatever supernatural force animated this thing, it could absorb more punishment than anything had a right to survive. The creature seemed to realize this was becoming a real fight. Instead of charging again immediately, it backed toward the front of the car, never taking its eyes off me. I kept my weapon trained on it, finger steady on the trigger, counting my remaining ammunition. "What are you?" I found myself asking, though I didn't expect an answer. The werewolf tilted its head, and for a moment, something almost human flickered in those yellow eyes. Then it spoke. Its voice a gravelly whisper that should have been impossible to produce with that elongated muzzle. "Hungry?" it said, the single word dripping with malevolent intelligence. The fact that it could speak was somehow more terrifying than all the carnage I had witnessed. This wasn't just a mindless beast. It was a thinking predator that chose to kill, chose to terrorize, chose to feed on human flesh and fear. The werewolf suddenly lunged to its left, using the seats as cover as it moved toward the side of the car. I tracked it with my weapon, but the narrow aisle and scattered debris made it difficult to get a clear shot. The creature was learning my capabilities, adapting its tactics. It disappeared behind an overturned seat, and I heard the sound of metal being torn apart. When it emerged seconds later, it was holding a jagged piece of the train's interior paneling like a shield, using it to protect its torso while exposing only its head and shoulders. Smart. Dangerously smart. I fired at the exposed portion of its skull, but the angle was wrong. The bullet sparked off the metal ceiling and ricocheted somewhere behind me. The werewolf's lips pulled back in that terrible grin again. It began advancing down the aisle, using the improvised shield to deflect my shots while closing the distance between us. Each step brought it closer to range where its claws could reach me, where my gun would become useless. I backed toward the rear of Car 1, trying to maintain distance while looking for anything I could use as a weapon once my ammunition ran out. The emergency equipment locker was mounted on the wall near the connecting door. If I could reach it, there might be tools inside that could help level the playing field. The werewolf seemed to sense my intention. It suddenly discarded the metal shield and charged, covering the remaining distance between us in 2 massive bounds. I got off one more shot that caught it in the shoulder, spinning it slightly, but not enough to stop its momentum. We collided in a tangle of claws and fury. The impact sent both of us crashing through the connecting door between cars 1 and 2, the twisted metal tearing at our clothes and skin as we rolled across the threshold. I found myself on top initially, the werewolf's bulk cushioning my fall. But before I could take advantage, those powerful hind legs kicked upward, launching me across the aisle to crash into a row of seats in car 2. The creature was on its feet instantly, blood flowing from multiple bullet wounds but showing no signs of weakening. If anything, the smell of blood, both its own and that of its victims, seemed to be driving it into a greater frenzy. I pulled myself upright, using a seat back for support. My weapon was somewhere on the floor, lost in the chaos of our collision. The emergency equipment locker was visible through the destroyed connecting door, but the werewolf stood between me and any hope of reaching it. That's when I heard voices from the rear of the train. Survivors in cars 3, 4, and 5 were calling out, asking what was happening, whether anyone needed help. They had no idea what was coming for them. The werewolf's head turned toward the sound, those yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation. Fresh prey, unaware and vulnerable. It took a step toward the rear of car 2, toward the connecting door that led to where innocent people waited in ignorance. "No," I said, forcing myself to stand straighter despite the pain in my ribs. "We're not finished." The creature looked back at me with what might have been amusement. Then it spoke again, that gravelly whisper that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. "Soon," it promised, and began moving toward the rear cars. I couldn't let that happen. These people were under my protection now, whether they knew it or not. I had failed too many civilians in Afghanistan and Iraq, left too many good people to die while I followed orders or pursued objectives. Not again, not here. I launched myself at the werewolf's back, wrapping my arms around its thick neck in a chokehold. The creature roared and spun around, trying to dislodge me, but I held on with the desperate strength of a man who knew that failure meant death for everyone on this train. Massive claws raked across my arms and back, tearing through my jacket and shirt to score the flesh beneath. Blood ran down my sides, but I didn't let go. The werewolf slammed me against the walls and seats, each impact driving spikes of pain through my injured ribs. But still I held on. The creature's struggles were becoming more frenzied, more desperate. It needed air just like any living thing, supernatural or not. But it was also incredibly strong, and I could feel my grip beginning to slip as blood made my hands slick. With a final surge of inhuman strength, the werewolf threw itself backward, slamming me against the emergency equipment locker with enough force to spiderweb the safety glass. My grip broke, and I fell to the floor as the creature spun to face me, gasping and snarling. But the impact had done what I needed it to do. The emergency locker's door hung open, its contents spilled across the floor. Among the first aid supplies and safety equipment, I saw what I was looking for, a fire axe with a gleaming steel head. I grabbed the weapon just as the werewolf lunged for my throat. The axe handle caught it across the muzzle with a solid crack that sent it staggering backward. Dark blood flowed from its nose, and I saw something that hadn't been there before: uncertainty. For the first time since this nightmare began, the creature looked at me with something approaching respect. It had learned that I could hurt it, could fight back effectively, but it had also tasted my blood, smelled my fear, and knew that I was just as mortal as its other victims. The werewolf crouched low, muscles bunching for another attack, but this time I was ready for it. The fire axe felt solid and balanced in my hands, a weapon designed to bite through wood and bone. If bullets couldn't kill this thing, maybe sharp steel could. Behind the creature, I could see movement in the connecting doorway to Car 3. Curious faces peering through the glass, trying to see what all the noise was about. Innocent people who had no idea they were about to witness a battle between man and monster in the narrow confines of a passenger train. The werewolf sensed them too. Its head turned slightly toward the rear cars, and I saw hunger flicker in those yellow eyes. That moment of distraction was all I needed. I brought the axe around in a vicious horizontal swing aimed at the creature's neck. The axe blade caught the werewolf across the side of its neck, biting deep into muscle and sinew. Dark blood sprayed across the windows and seats as the creature's roar of pain echoed through the car. But instead of falling, it spun with the momentum of the blow, using its own wound to fuel a counterattack. Massive claws raked across my chest, tearing through my shirt and the Kevlar vest beneath. The impact sent me stumbling backward into the aisle, but I kept my grip on the axe. Blood flowed from parallel gashes across my torso, but the vest had absorbed the worst of the damage. The werewolf pressed its attack, driven into a frenzy by pain and rage. It came at me with a series of slashing strikes, each one aimed at my head or throat. I used the axe handle to block and parry, the solid oak absorbing impacts that would have shattered bone. We fought our way down the narrow aisle of Car 2, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. The confined space worked against both of us. The creature couldn't use its full speed and agility, but I couldn't get enough room to swing the axe with maximum force. Behind the werewolf, I could see faces pressed against the glass of the connecting door to Car 3. The passengers back there had heard the fighting and were trying to see what was happening. Their expressions of curiosity were rapidly changing to horror as they caught glimpses of the battle taking place just yards away from them. The creature noticed them too. In the middle of our fight, its yellow eyes flicked toward the rear cars, and I saw fresh hunger kindle there. It was calculating, planning how to get past me to reach those helpless people. I brought the axe down in an overhead strike aimed at its skull. The werewolf dodged to the side, but not quickly enough. The blade caught it across the left shoulder, opening a gash that went to the bone. Its left arm went limp, hanging useless at its side. But even wounded, it was far from finished. The creature's right arm swept across in a backhand strike that caught me across the jaw. Stars exploded across my vision as I was lifted off my feet and slammed into a row of seats. The werewolf advanced for what it clearly intended to be the killing blow. But as it stepped forward, its wounded leg buckled slightly. The bullet I had put into its shoulder earlier, combined with the axe wounds, was finally taking its toll. I rolled to the side just as massive claws raked the spot where my head had been, Metal sparked as the talons gouged deep furrows in the seat frame. I came up swinging, catching the creature across its wounded ribs with a horizontal strike that drew another bellow of pain. We were both bleeding now, both wounded, both running on adrenaline and determination. But I had one advantage. I knew these people were counting on me, even if they didn't realize it yet. I had something to fight for beyond my own survival. The werewolf seemed to sense this. Its attacks became more desperate, more reckless. It was trying to end this quickly, before its wounds weakened it further. But desperation made it sloppy. When it lunged for my throat with snapping jaws, I sidestepped and brought the axe around in an uppercut that caught it under the chin. The impact snapped its head back and sent it stumbling into the wall of the car. For a moment, the creature stood there, swaying, dark blood streaming from its wounds. Its yellow eyes had lost some of their glow, and its breathing was labored. I thought maybe, finally, I had heard it enough to put it down. Then I heard screaming from car 3. Through the connecting door's window, I could see chaos erupting in the next car. Passengers were running, shouting, pointing at something I couldn't see. But I could guess what had terrified them. They had gotten a clear look at the werewolf during our fight. The creature heard the screams too, and they seemed to energize it. Its head came up, nostrils flaring as it scented the fear coming from the rear cars. Whatever weakness my attacks had caused was pushed aside by the promise of fresh prey. More, it growled, that terrible voice filled with anticipation. So many more. It turned toward the connecting door, dismissing me as no longer a significant threat. The werewolf was confident it could push past me, reach the terrified passengers in car 3, and feed on their fear and flesh. I couldn't let that happen. I raised the axe and brought it down with every ounce of strength I had left, aiming for the base of the creature's skull. But the werewolf's reflexes were still lightning fast. It spun at the last second, and instead of splitting its head open, the blade buried itself in its right shoulder. The creature roared and grabbed the axe handle with its good arm, trying to wrench the weapon away from me. We stood locked together, both of us pulling on the embedded axe, neither willing to give ground. That's when the lights went out. Not just the emergency lighting this time, everything. The train was plunged into absolute darkness as the electrical system finally failed completely. In the sudden blindness, I could hear the werewolf's labored breathing inches from my face, could smell the blood and musk of its fur. But I could also hear something else, voices from the locomotive. The engineer and conductor were still alive up front, trying to deal with whatever had caused the power failure. The train was still moving, still carrying us through the Wisconsin night at full speed. In the darkness, I felt the werewolf's grip on the axe handle weaken slightly. Its wounds were taking their toll, sapping its strength. I wrenched the weapon free and heard the creature stumble backward in the darkness. Emergency lighting flickered back on, bathing everything in that hellish red glow. The werewolf was leaning against the wall of the car, its right arm now hanging as useless as its left. Dark blood pooled at its feet, and its breathing came in ragged gasps. But its eyes still burned with that unholy yellow fire. And when it looked at me, I saw something that made my heart sink. Intelligence, planning. The creature wasn't beaten. It was adapting. "You fight well," it said, its voice a harsh whisper. "But you cannot protect them all. Not forever." Through the connecting door, I could see passengers in car 3 huddled together, too terrified to flee further back into the train. They were trapped between their fear of the unknown and their fear of what they had seen. The werewolf saw them too. Despite its wounds, despite the blood loss, it started moving toward the rear of car 2. Not quickly, but with inexorable determination. It knew I was weakening too, knew that eventually I would make a mistake or my strength would fail. I hefted the axe, feeling its weight in my hands. The blade was slick with the creature's blood, but the steel was still sharp. If this thing wanted to reach those innocent people, it would have to go through me. The werewolf reached the connecting door and pressed its face against the window. The passengers in car 3 screamed and pressed themselves against the far wall, as far from the door as they could get. But there was nowhere for them to go. They were trapped in a metal tube with a monster that wanted nothing more than to tear them apart. The creature turned back to me, and I saw satisfaction in those yellow eyes. It had made its point. I could hurt it, maybe even kill it eventually, but not before it killed some of those people. The mathematics of the situation were simple and brutal. But I had learned something too. The werewolf was intelligent, which meant it could be reasoned with, bargained with, maybe even tricked. And despite its supernatural strength and speed, it was still bound by certain physical limitations. It was bleeding, it could be hurt, and most importantly, it needed those people to be afraid. I straightened up, ignoring the pain from my wounds, and looked the creature directly in its glowing eyes. "You want them?" I said. "Come and take them." The werewolf's lips pulled back in that terrible grin, revealing every razor-sharp fang. It knew I was bluffing, knew I was barely standing, but it also knew I wouldn't go down easily. And somewhere in those intelligent yellow eyes, I saw the first flicker of uncertainty I had seen since this nightmare began. The werewolf studied me for a long moment, those yellow eyes calculating the odds. It could see I was wounded, bleeding, running on fumes and determination. But it could also see I wasn't backing down, wasn't going to simply step aside and let it slaughter innocent people. "Stubborn," it growled, the word barely recognizable through its elongated muzzle. Like the others who tried to stop me. "Others?" I kept my voice steady, trying to buy time while I looked for any advantage I could use. The creature's lips pulled back in that terrible grin. "Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, always someone who thinks they can be a hero." Its head tilted slightly. They all died, screaming. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This thing hadn't just randomly appeared on our train. It was hunting systematically, moving from city to city, train to train. How many people had died while authorities dismissed the attacks as animal maulings or gang violence? "But you're different," the werewolf continued, taking a step closer. "Military training, combat experience. You've killed before." Its nostrils flared as it scented the air. "I can smell the death on you." "Afghanistan? Iraq?" I didn't answer, but my silence was confirmation enough. The creature nodded with satisfaction. "Good. That means you understand what I am, what I do." "These people behind me." It gestured toward car 3 without taking its eyes off me. "They're prey, cattle, food. You can delay their deaths, but you cannot prevent them." Through the connecting door, I could hear whispered conversations, people trying to understand what they had witnessed. Someone was crying softly. A woman's voice, probably traumatized by seeing the werewolf's face pressed against the glass. "They don't deserve this," I said. "Deserve?" The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What does deserve have to do with anything? The deer doesn't deserve the wolf. The mouse doesn't deserve the cat. I am what I am, and they are what they are." It was trying to distract me, keep me talking while it recovered from its wounds. But I was doing the same thing, looking for any weakness I could exploit. The emergency lighting cast weird shadows throughout the car, and I noticed something. The werewolf favored its left side, unconsciously protecting the deep gashes I had opened in its ribs. "You're not just an animal," I said. "You can think, plan, speak. That makes you responsible for what you choose to do." "Responsible?" The word came out as a snarl. "I didn't choose this curse. It was forced on me, just like it will be forced on others. The cycle continues, as it always has. Then break it. The werewolf's eyes flared with rage. You think I haven't tried? You think I enjoy being this monster, craving human flesh, losing myself to the hunger every full moon? Its voice rose to a roar that made the windows rattle. I've spent 3 years trying to die, and I can't. Silver bullets, holy water, fire, nothing works. Nothing stops it. The raw pain in its voice caught me off guard. For a moment, I saw past the monster to the human being trapped inside. Someone who had been cursed with an existence they never wanted, forced to kill and feed against their will. But that moment of sympathy passed quickly, as I remembered Gerald's torn body, the teenager who had died trying to run, all the innocent people who had suffered because this thing couldn't control itself. Then you make a choice, I said. Every full moon, you choose whether to hunt people or isolate yourself where you can't hurt anyone. Easy words from someone who's never felt the hunger. The werewolf's claws flexed, gouging furrows in the metal wall. When the change comes, human thoughts fade. Only the beast remains, and the beast must feed. But you're talking to me now. You're still in there, still aware. That means you have some control. The creature was silent for a long moment. Its breathing labored from blood loss and exertion. When it spoke again, its voice was quieter, more human. My name was David Chen. I was a security guard at Union Station in Chicago. 3 months ago, something bit me during a night shift. By the time I realized what I was becoming, it was too late. David Chen. A real person with a real life, now trapped in a nightmare of supernatural hunger and violence. I felt a stab of sympathy, but I couldn't let it weaken my resolve. Whatever had happened to him, he was still killing innocent people. It doesn't have to be this way, I said. There has to be someone who can help, some way to break the curse. I've tried everything. Priests, doctors, researchers who study the occult. Nothing works. David's voice carried decades of despair compressed into 3 months of horror. The only thing that helps is feeding. When I taste human blood, the pain stops for a while. The hunger quiets. So you choose to hunt on trains because they're isolated, contained, nowhere for people to run. I choose nothing. The beast was back, David's humanity submerged beneath supernatural rage. The hunger chooses. The moon chooses. I am what the curse made me. It lunged forward, moving faster than something that wounded should have been able to move. I brought the axe up to block, but the creature's good arm swept it aside like it was a toy. Claws raked across my chest, reopening the wounds from earlier and adding new ones. I stumbled backward, blood flowing freely now. The werewolf followed up with a backhand strike that caught me across the jaw and sent me sprawling into the aisle between seats. The taste of blood filled my mouth, and my vision blurred. The creature loomed over me, silhouetted against the emergency lighting like something out of a nightmare. I tried to give you a clean death, it said, but you had to make it difficult. It raised its claws for what would be the killing blow, but that's when the train lurched violently to the right. The sudden motion threw both of us sideways as the wheels hit something on the tracks, debris maybe, or a damaged section of rail. The werewolf crashed into a row of seats, its wounded ribs taking the brunt of the impact. I used the momentary distraction to roll away and grab the fire axe, which had skittered across the floor during my fall. Through the windows, I could see lights in the distance, a town maybe, or a rail yard. We were approaching some kind of civilization, which meant potential help or at least witnesses. The werewolf saw the lights too, and I could see calculation in its yellow eyes. If it was going to finish its hunt on this train, it needed to do so quickly. The creature pulled itself upright, moving more slowly now. The impact with the seats had reopened its wounds, and dark blood was flowing freely from the gashes in its shoulder and ribs. But its eyes still burned with that supernatural hunger, and when it looked at me, I saw my death reflected there. "Last chance," it said. "Walk away. Go to the back of the train and wait. I'll make their deaths quick." I hefted the axe and got to my feet, ignoring the pain from my own wounds. "No." The werewolf nodded as if it had expected that answer. "Then you die with them." It charged, putting everything it had left into one final attack. But this time, I was ready. Instead of trying to block or dodge, I dropped to one knee and angled the axe upward, letting the creature's own momentum drive the blade deep into its chest. The steel head punched through fur and flesh and bone, burying itself to the hilt in the werewolf's torso. Dark blood erupted from the wound, spraying across my face and arms as the creature's roar of pain echoed through the car. But even with a fire axe buried in its chest, it wasn't finished. Massive hands closed around my throat, claws piercing the skin as supernatural strength began to crush my windpipe. Stars exploded across my vision as oxygen was cut off to my brain. I looked into those yellow eyes, now only inches from my own, and saw something I hadn't expected: gratitude. David Chen was still in there somewhere, and he was grateful that someone had finally been strong enough to end his nightmare. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice human again for just a moment. Then the light faded from his eyes, and the massive hands fell away from my throat. The werewolf collapsed backward onto the blood-soaked floor of Car 2, the fire axe still protruding from its chest. I knelt there for a long moment, gasping for air, hardly able to believe it was over. Through the connecting door, I could see faces pressed against the glass. Survivors who had witnessed at least part of the battle. People who would need explanations I wasn't sure I could give. But as I started to stand, I heard something that made my blood freeze. From somewhere in the front of the train came a sound I recognized, the wet, tearing noise of claws going through metal. I looked down at the werewolf's body, and my heart sank. David Chen's human features were becoming visible beneath the fur, his face peaceful in death. But his chest was still rising and falling, and as I watched, the wounds I had inflicted were beginning to close. The fire axe was pushed out of his chest by regenerating tissue, clattering to the floor with a sound like a death knell. Yellow eyes opened and fixed on me with renewed hunger. "Told you," the werewolf said, its voice filled with dark amusement. "Nothing stops it." The werewolf's regeneration was horrifying to watch. Flesh knitted itself back together, wounds sealed, and the creature's strength returned with each passing second. Within moments, it was back on its feet, completely healed, looking at me with those burning yellow eyes. "Now you understand," it said, flexing its claws. "This is why I stopped trying to die. This is why the hunger always wins." I backed toward the connecting door to Car 3, my mind racing. If the creature could regenerate from any wound, then conventional weapons were useless. But there had to be something, some weakness, some way to stop it permanently. "Silver," I said. "You mentioned silver bullets don't work, but what about other forms of silver?" The werewolf laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "I've tried everything. Silver, holy water, wooden stakes, fire. The curse is too strong. The only thing that gives me peace is feeding." Through the glass door behind me, I could see the passengers in Car 3 pressed against the far wall. A middle-aged woman was sobbing quietly while a businessman tried to comfort her. An elderly man clutched a walking cane like a weapon, knowing it would be useless but refusing to go down without a fight. "Then we keep fighting," I said, raising my hands in a defensive stance. The fire axe was gone, my gun was empty, but I wasn't giving up. Not while innocent people depended on me. "Admirable," the werewolf said, beginning to advance slowly down the aisle. "But pointless. I heal faster than you can hurt me now. And you?" It gestured at the blood soaking my shirt, the wounds that weren't healing with supernatural speed. You're only getting weaker. It was right. I could feel my strength ebbing with each drop of blood I lost. My vision was starting to blur around the edges, and my hands were shaking from blood loss. But I had to keep trying. Had to find some way to protect these people. The creature reached me in 2 quick strides. Its claws raked across my chest again, opening new wounds and deepening old ones. The impact sent me stumbling into the connecting door, my back pressed against the glass. Behind me, I heard gasps of horror as the passengers got a clear view of my injuries. Someone was pounding on the other side of the door, trying to open it, but the mechanism had been damaged during our earlier fight. "Let us help," a man's voice called out. "We can get you out of there." "Stay back," I shouted, not taking my eyes off the werewolf. "Keep the door closed." The creature grinned at this exchange. How noble, protecting them even as you die. It grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground with one hand. "I think I'll let them watch what happens next. Let them see how easily their hero falls." My feet dangled in the air as the werewolf's grip tightened around my throat. Stars exploded across my vision as oxygen was cut off, but I forced myself to keep thinking, keep looking for any advantage. That's when I noticed something. Through the windows of Car 2, I could see we were approaching a railroad bridge, a high span crossing a river valley. But more importantly, I could see the eastern horizon, where the first pale hints of dawn were beginning to show. The full moon was setting. Sunrise was less than an hour away. "The moon," I gasped through the creature's grip. "It's setting." The werewolf's eyes flicked toward the windows, and for just a moment I saw uncertainty there. "Dawn is still far away," it said, but there was less confidence in its voice than before. "Is it?" I managed to raise one hand and point toward the horizon. "Look closer." The creature turned to look, and in that moment of distraction, I drove my knee up into its wounded ribs with every ounce of strength I had left. The werewolf's grip loosened just enough for me to break free and drop to the floor. I rolled away and came up near the emergency equipment locker, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My hands closed around a fire extinguisher. Not much against a supernatural predator, but better than nothing. The werewolf was studying the horizon now, and I could see real concern in its posture. The pale light in the east was getting stronger, and with it came the promise of sunrise. As the full moon's influence waned, the creature's confidence was beginning to crack. "You feel it, don't you?" I said, hefting the fire extinguisher. The change starting to weaken, David Chen fighting to get back in control. "Shut up!" the werewolf snarled, but its voice carried a tremor that hadn't been there before. "He's still in there, isn't he? Still aware, still fighting against what the curse made him do. How many people has he been forced to kill while you wore his face?" The creature's form seemed to flicker for a moment, the massive frame wavering like a mirage. When it solidified, the features were slightly more human, still monstrous but with hints of the man trapped inside. 3 years, David Chen's voice whispered through the werewolf's throat. 3 years of watching through these eyes, feeling the hunger, tasting the blood. Do you know what that does to a man's soul? Then help me end it, I said. Fight back, take control. I can't. The human voice was getting stronger as the moon's influence continued to wane. When the hunger comes, I disappear. I become a passenger in my own body, watching it kill and feed and destroy. Through the windows, the eastern sky was definitely getting lighter. We had maybe 30 minutes until full sunrise, when the werewolf's power would be at its weakest. If I could keep it talking, keep David Chen's humanity in control until then. The people you've killed, I said carefully. Do you remember them? Pain flickered across the creature's features, all of them. Every face, every scream, every drop of blood. The beast feeds, but I remember. Then make it mean something. Use that pain, that guilt, to fight back against the curse. Don't let their deaths be meaningless. The werewolf's form was definitely becoming less stable now. Its massive frame shrank slightly, the fur becoming less thick, the claws retracting partially. David Chen was fighting for control as the full moon's power weakened, but the transformation wasn't happening fast enough. Even in its weakened state, the creature was still deadly, still driven by supernatural hunger, and I was running out of time and strength. That's when I heard voices from the front of the train, the engineer and conductor, alive and apparently trying to regain control of the locomotive. If I could reach them, get them to stop the train or at least slow it down, maybe we could survive until sunrise. The werewolf heard the voices too. Its head snapped toward the front of the car, nostrils flaring as it scented new prey. Whatever internal struggle was taking place between David Chen and the beast, the promise of fresh victims was tipping the balance back toward the monster. "No," I said, moving to block its path. "It ends here." The creature looked at me with something approaching pity. "You're half dead already. What can you possibly do to stop me?" I raised the fire extinguisher, knowing it was a pathetic gesture, but making it anyway. "Whatever it takes." "Ein!" The werewolf laughed and swatted the extinguisher from my hands like it was a toy. Then it grabbed me by the shirt and threw me against the side wall of the car with enough force to crack the window behind me. I slumped to the floor, my vision graying around the edges. Blood was pooling beneath me now, and I could feel my strength finally giving out. The werewolf advanced for what would certainly be the killing blow. But as it reached for me, something unexpected happened. The creature's hands began to shake, its form wavering between human and beast. David Chen's face became visible through the wolf features, his eyes filled with desperate determination. "Can't," he gasped, fighting against his own claws. "Won't let it happen again, not anymore." The internal struggle was tearing him apart. His body convulsed as human will battled supernatural hunger, as David Chen fought with everything he had to prevent another innocent death. Through the windows, the sky was getting noticeably brighter. Dawn was coming, and with it, the werewolf's power would fade. But the question was whether David Chen could maintain control long enough, or whether the beast would win one final victory before the sun rose. The creature fell to its knees, hands pressed against its skull, as two personalities fought for dominance. When it looked up at me, I saw human eyes filled with tears. "Kill me," David Chen begged. "Please." Before it takes control again. Before I hurt anyone else. But I had no weapon left. No strength to deliver a killing blow, even if I wanted to. All I could do was watch as a good man fought the most important battle of his life against the monster that lived inside his skin. Outside, the eastern horizon was painted with the first real colors of dawn. But it might not be enough to save us. David Chen's internal struggle was becoming more violent with each passing moment. His body convulsed as if he was having a seizure, muscles spasming as human consciousness fought against supernatural hunger. The werewolf form flickered in and out of existence like a broken television signal. 3 years, he gasped between convulsions. 3 years I've let it win. Let it use my body to kill innocent people. His eyes met mine, and I saw a determination there that hadn't existed before. Not anymore. Through the windows, the sky was growing brighter by the minute. The full moon was almost completely set, its supernatural influence waning with each degree it dropped below the horizon. But the transformation back to human form was happening too slowly, and I could see the beast fighting to maintain control. The creature's claws scraped against the metal floor as it tried to stand, tried to reach me for one final kill. But David Chen's will was stronger now, fed by 3 years of guilt and self-hatred. Every time the werewolf tried to move forward, the human personality pulled it back. "The people in car 3, David said, his voice becoming more human with each word. "Are they safe?" I looked through the connecting door. The passengers were still pressed against the far wall, watching our struggle with a mixture of horror and fascination. They were alive, unharmed, but trapped in a metal tube with a monster that could break free at any moment. "For now," I said. "But if you lose control again?" "I won't." David's form was becoming more human now, the massive werewolf frame shrinking as the moon's power faded. But the process was leaving him weak, exhausted, bleeding from wounds that were no longer healing at supernatural speed. That's when we heard footsteps in the connecting walkway between cars 2 and 1. Heavy boots on metal flooring, moving cautiously but steadily toward us. The engineer and conductor were coming to investigate the noise, walking directly into a nightmare they couldn't possibly understand. "No," David whispered, struggling to his feet. "They'll see me like this. They'll try to help, and the beast will." He doubled over in pain as another wave of transformation racked his body. The footsteps were getting closer. Through the damaged connecting door, I could see a flashlight beam sweeping back and forth, illuminating the carnage in car 1. Voices were calling out, asking if anyone was injured, if anyone needed help. I forced myself to stand, using the wall for support. My vision was still blurry from blood loss, but I had to keep those men away from David until the transformation was complete. If they saw him in his current state, half human, half monster, they might try to restrain him or call for help, triggering the werewolf's defensive instincts. "Stay back," I called out, my voice hoarse from the creature's grip on my throat. "Don't come in here." "Sir, are you injured?" The voice was professional, calm, probably the conductor. "We've had reports of some kind of disturbance. We're here to help." "I said stay back." I put as much authority into my voice as I could muster. "There's been an accident. Dangerous debris. Give us a few minutes." Behind me, David was fighting the most important battle of his life. His body was becoming more human by the minute, but the process was agonizing. Sweat poured down his face as he struggled to maintain control, to keep the beast locked away until sunrise could complete the transformation. "The moon," he gasped, pointing toward the windows. "How much longer?" I looked outside. The eastern horizon was painted with brilliant oranges and reds now, the colors of dawn spreading across the Wisconsin countryside. The full moon was barely visible, a pale disk disappearing behind the western horizon. 10 minutes, I estimated. Maybe less. David nodded and closed his eyes, focusing all his will on maintaining human consciousness. His form continued to shift and change, but the werewolf was definitely losing its hold. The supernatural strength was fading, the healing ability weakening, the predatory hunger being pushed back by human reason and morality. The footsteps in the connecting walkway had stopped, but I could hear whispered conversations. The train crew was discussing what to do, whether to force their way in or call for backup. Either option could be disastrous if they arrived before David's transformation was complete. "Sir?" The conductor's voice again, closer now. "We really need to assess the situation. People have been calling about screaming, sounds of fighting. Are you certain you don't need medical attention?" I looked at David, who was now recognizably human despite the torn clothes and bloodstains. His face was drawn with exhaustion and pain, but his eyes were clear, intelligent, free of the yellow glow that had marked the werewolf. "It's done," he whispered. "The beast is gone. At least until the next full moon." Through the windows, the first rays of actual sunlight were beginning to slant through the trees. The full moon had set completely, its malevolent influence broken by the promise of a new day. David Chen was himself again, Just a man haunted by the memories of what he had been forced to do. But we still had problems. The train car was soaked with blood, both mine and the werewolf's. Bodies lay scattered throughout car 1, torn apart by supernatural fury. David himself was covered in gore, his clothes shredded, looking like a survivor of a massacre rather than its perpetrator. "The police," David said quietly. "When they investigate this, when they see what happened here, how do we explain it?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. I had been focused entirely on survival, on protecting the innocent passengers. But David was right. This scene would be impossible to explain to conventional authorities. A train full of dead bodies, all killed by something with claws and fangs that could tear through steel. "We'll figure something out," I said, though I had no idea what. "Right now, we need to get you cleaned up and make sure the other passengers are safe." David nodded and started to stand, but the effort proved too much. 3 years of fighting the werewolf curse, combined with the trauma of finally winning that battle, had left him completely drained. He collapsed back to the floor, unconscious but breathing. The footsteps in the connecting walkway were moving again, getting closer. In moments, the train crew would be in car 2, and they would see everything. The blood, the bodies, David's unconscious form. Questions would be asked that I couldn't answer. I looked through the glass door to car 3, where the passengers were still huddled together. They had witnessed at least part of the supernatural battle, had seen things that defied rational explanation. Their testimony, combined with the physical evidence, would paint a picture that no one would believe. Unless we all agreed on a different story. I limped to the connecting door and managed to force it open. The passengers backed away as I entered, fear written across their faces. Blood covered my clothes and hands, and I probably looked like something out of a horror movie. "Listen to me," I said, my voice carrying the authority of my military training. "What you saw tonight never happened. What you think you saw was a hallucination caused by trauma from a train accident. Is that understood?" They stared at me in silence, processing what I was asking them to do. Finally, the elderly man with the walking cane spoke up. "And if we don't agree to forget?" I looked back toward car 2, where David Chen lay unconscious, free of his curse for the first time in 3 years. Then I looked at the blood on my hands, the evidence of a battle that could never be officially acknowledged. "Then a good man dies for something that wasn't his fault," I said simply. "And the real monsters, the ones who created this curse in the first place, go free to do it again." The passengers exchanged glances, silently communicating their decision. When the businessman finally nodded, the others followed suit. They would keep the secret, protect David Chen from a world that wouldn't understand his burden. Outside, the sun was fully up now, painting the Wisconsin countryside in shades of gold and green. The nightmare was over, at least for another month. But as I listened to the approaching footsteps of the train crew, I knew our real challenges were just beginning. How do you hide a supernatural massacre? How do you protect a man cursed to become a monster when the moon is full? And most importantly, how do you prepare for the next time it happens? Because there would be a next time. David Chen was free of the werewolf's influence for now, but in 28 days, when the moon rose full again, the beast would return. And unless we found a way to break the curse permanently, the killing would start all over again. The conductor's voice was right outside the connecting door now, demanding answers I couldn't give. I looked one last time at the sleeping passengers in car 3, at David Chen's unconscious form in car 2, at the carnage that filled car 1. Then I started planning the lies I would need to tell to keep a good man alive. The conductor pushed through the connecting door just as I finished positioning myself between him and David's unconscious form. His name tag read, William Morrison, and his face showed the strain of a man who had heard screaming and violence, but couldn't understand what had caused it. Jesus Christ, he breathed, taking in the blood-soaked scene. His flashlight beam swept across the destroyed interior of Car 2, the bent metal, the claw marks that had been gouged into the walls. What the hell happened here? Animal attack, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the pain from my wounds. Something got onto the train somehow. A bear, maybe, or a large dog. It went crazy, started attacking passengers. Morrison's eyes narrowed as he studied me. I was covered in blood, my clothes torn, looking like I had been through a war. Behind me, David Chen remained mercifully unconscious, hidden in the shadows where the conductor couldn't see him clearly. "Where's this animal now?" Morrison asked, his hand moving instinctively toward the radio on his belt. "Dead," I said simply. "I managed to kill it, but not before." I gestured toward Car 1, where the real carnage lay. "There are bodies up there, a lot of them." The conductor's face went pale. In 20 years of railroad service, he had seen accidents, derailments, even the occasional suicide, but nothing like this. His hands shook as he raised his radio. "This is Morrison in Car 2, he said. "We have a code red situation, multiple casualties, possible fatalities. I need emergency services at our next stop immediately." The radio crackled with static and urgent voices as word of the disaster spread. Soon the train would be surrounded by police, paramedics, investigators, all asking questions I couldn't answer truthfully. "Sir," Morrison said, turning back to me, "I need you to come with me to the rear of the train. You need medical attention, and I need to secure this area until help arrives." I shook my head. "I'm staying here. There might be other survivors who need help." "Sir, I understand you've been through trauma, but protocol requires—" "I'm former Special Forces," I interrupted, letting authority color my voice. "I know how to handle crime scenes. Let me do my job." Morrison hesitated, clearly torn between following procedure and acknowledging that I might know what I was doing. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "10 minutes, he said. "Then you're coming with me whether you like it or not." As soon as he left, I knelt beside David Chen and checked his pulse. Strong and steady, though his breathing was shallow. The transformation back to human form had exhausted him completely, but he was alive and stable. I used torn fabric from my shirt to wipe the blood from his face and hands, trying to make him look more like a victim than a perpetrator. His clothes were shredded, but that could be explained by the animal attack. What couldn't be explained were the wounds that were healing too quickly, the supernatural strength that was fading but still present. David's eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with difficulty. "Is it over?" he whispered. "For now," I said. "But we have bigger problems. The authorities are coming and they're going to want answers." "The truth?" I shook my head. "Animal attack. You were unconscious through most of it. Don't remember details. Can you stick to that story?" David closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he had passed out again. When he opened them, they were filled with a pain that had nothing to do with physical injuries. 23 people, he said quietly. "In 3 years, I've killed 23 innocent people. And now you want me to lie about it. Pretend I'm just another victim." "You are a victim," I said firmly. "You didn't choose this curse. You didn't want to kill anyone. The real culprit is whatever made you into a werewolf in the first place. That doesn't bring them back. No, it doesn't. But rotting in prison or being executed won't bring them back either. What it will do is guarantee that we never find a way to break the curse. Never prevent this from happening again." David was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he nodded slowly. "What's our story?" I had been thinking about that since Morrison left. "You're a railroad security consultant, traveling on this train to evaluate safety protocols. When the animal attack started, you tried to help evacuate passengers but got knocked unconscious early in the fight. You don't remember anything after that. And the animal, killed by falling debris when it damaged the train's structure. The body was thrown from the train during the struggle. It was a thin story, but it might hold up under initial questioning. Through the windows, I could see lights in the distance, the next town, where emergency services would be waiting. We had maybe 5 minutes before the train stopped, and our lives became infinitely more complicated. "David," I said, "I need you to understand something. This isn't over. In 28 days, when the next full moon rises, the werewolf will come back. We need to be ready for that." His face crumpled with despair. I thought, when I fought it off this time, when I managed to stay in control, I thought maybe it was broken. The curse is still there, but you proved something important tonight. You can fight it. You can maintain some level of human consciousness even when the beast is in control. That's more than most werewolves can manage. Most werewolves? David's eyes widened. There are others? I realized I had said too much, revealed knowledge I shouldn't possess. But there was no taking it back now. I've encountered similar situations in my military service, overseas in places where old superstitions still hold power. This isn't the first time I've seen someone cursed with lycanthropy. It was a lie, but a necessary one. The truth was that I had learned about werewolves the same way David had, through brutal, terrifying experience. But he needed to believe that someone understood his condition, that there was hope for a cure. The train was slowing down now, brakes squealing as we approached the emergency stop. Through the windows, I could see flashing lights, police cars, ambulances, fire trucks. The full weight of law enforcement was about to descend on our blood-soaked train car. "Remember," I said urgently, "you're a victim, not the perpetrator. You were trying to help when you got hurt. You don't remember details because of head trauma. Stick to that story no matter what they ask." David nodded, though I could see the guilt eating at him. 3 years of involuntary killing had left scars on his soul that wouldn't heal as easily as his physical wounds. The train came to a complete stop with a final, shuddering jolt. Immediately, voices could be heard outside. Paramedics coordinating, police establishing a perimeter, investigators preparing to document what they thought would be an animal attack. They had no idea they were about to encounter evidence of the supernatural. Footsteps pounded on the platform outside, and powerful lights began illuminating the train cars. Soon, Car 2 would be flooded with law enforcement officers, and David and I would have to sell the performance of our lives. I helped him sit up against a seat, positioning him to look like an injured victim rather than an unconscious perpetrator. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, his face pale with exhaustion. He looked the part of someone who had survived a horrific ordeal. The connecting door burst open, and paramedics rushed in with medical equipment and stretchers. Behind them came police officers with weapons drawn, expecting to find a dangerous animal or an armed assailant. Instead, they found 2 wounded men in a blood-soaked train car, surrounded by evidence of violence they couldn't begin to understand. "We need medical attention," I called out, letting pain color my voice. "My friend here has been unconscious. I think he has a concussion." The paramedics immediately went to work, checking our vital signs, examining our wounds, asking rapid-fire questions about our injuries. The police officers spread out through the car, documenting the scene, taking photographs, trying to piece together what had happened. One detective, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, approached me while the paramedics worked on David. "I'm Detective Sarah Martinez," she said, pulling out a notebook. "Can you tell me what happened here?" I looked her in the eyes and prepared to tell the biggest lie of my life. "It was like something out of a nightmare," I began, and started weaving the story that would either save David Chen's life or damn us both. Marcus Reed's nightmare on that Wisconsin train is chilling proof that some monsters hide behind human faces, and the real terror comes when you realize the beast might be someone you'd never suspect. The curse of lycanthropy continues to spread through our modern world, and we'll be here to track every bloody trail it leaves behind. Like this video if you felt the claustrophobic terror of being trapped with a predator in that metal coffin. Comment below. What was more terrifying for you? The werewolf's savage attacks or the moment you realized it was once human? Share it with someone who needs to know that ancient curses still hunt in the shadows of civilization. And if you have the courage to face what lurks in the darkness, subscribe to Mr. Midnight Horror and ring that notification bell. Because when the next full moon rises, you'll want to know what's prowling in the night.